Angel Bumpus was 25 years old when she was accused of the 2009 killing of a 68-year-old man, Franklin Bonner. Bonner's body had been discovered by his wife Linda when she returned home from work. Her husband's arms and legs were bound to a chair and his face was covered with duct tape, which caused him to suffocate. 2 fingerprints would be identified in this case, which would cause the life of Angel Bumpus to crumble. But could a 13-year-old really commit such a violent and gruesome act? Hey everybody, and welcome to the Student's Verdict podcast. Thank you so much for joining me for episode 10. For those of you who are new, hi, my name is Emily and I'm your host. If you haven't already, please go and listen to some of our earlier episodes, which include cases such as the disappearance of Marlene Oakes and the McMartin preschool abuse scandal. Also, please follow us on Instagram. Our new handle is at the Student Verdict Pod, that's P-O-D at the end, and on Twitter at Student Verdict. Resources used in this episode will always be linked in the show notes, but our primary source for this episode is the Sky Crime documentary series, Accused, Guilty or Innocent. If you enjoy our show today, please rate and review. And if you don't enjoy it, then please keep opinions to yourself. Now, let's jump into today's episode, which was chosen by my special guest. Joining me to celebrate episode 10 is my mum, Emma.
Hi, my name is Emma. I am Emily's mum. I'm a working mum. I am a social worker in adult social care, and I volunteer for a charity called the Red Foundation, which is rehoming and emergency foster for Dachshunds. We have 6 Dachshunds of our own, and yes, that's 6. So please do check out the Red Foundation on Facebook. I've never done anything like this before, so please be kind. I've always had an interest in true crime, but it has purely been a hobby. So hope you enjoy.
So, our case today is from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and the way that this case came about was I got a very sort of excited phone call from my mum. Maybe excited isn't the word. So she'd been watching Accused, Guilty or Innocent on Sky Crime. It's a series. If you haven't watched it, I really recommend it. So on this episode in particular, there was the case of Angel Bumpus. Now, her case, I think today it's going to really shock you. Mum, you were really shocked by the outcome of this case.
Yes. I have just a general interest in true crime. So watching this series each episode has drawn sort of some quite extreme emotion. Sometimes I'm elated and sometimes I'm literally astounded with the outcome. And maybe that's from the point of view that I may not have full understanding. I'm obviously not trained in law, but I felt passionate enough to say to Emily, you must watch this, just to really get her point of view, given her background and her training.
So the way the episode started was we've got this phone call, and it is the wife of the victim. Now, the wife is called Linda, and on the 16th of January 2009, she makes a call to 911, and she's frantic, she's crying. The dispatcher asks her, "Are you okay, ma'am?" To which she replies, "I came home and my husband's tied up. He's not breathing. Help me." And I mean, do you want to talk about, it's awful what happened to this poor man.
So the photos from the episode are quite horrific. This gentleman isn't bound, as you may see in some sort of cop series, by his wrists and ankles. He is bound fully, his arms, his legs, repeatedly. It's horrific. The scene is horrific, which makes it even more interesting, the facts to come, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so to the dispatcher, the wife, Linda, she says, "I cut the duct tape off his face, but he's not breathing. Please hurry. Oh my God. Oh my God." So the scene, as Mum says, so from the pictures, obviously they blur out his face, but they're absolutely awful. You have got a man duct taped to a chair. The chair appears to be tipped over, and the house is ransacked. There is stuff everywhere, as if someone's gone through it. And the pathologist would later conclude that the duct tape around his face, we'll talk about the court case, in his wife's evidence, she says that the duct tape was around his face and sort of in strips up and down as well. It's pretty graphic stuff.
I think it's the excessiveness of the duct tape. I can't really describe it. I don't know whether you can consider the restraint of this gentleman seems excessive.
Yeah.
In that sense, obviously, when we're talking about the arms being wrapped repeatedly and around the chair, his legs, it just seems excessive.
Yeah, it does. It's almost like it's overkill. And I don't think that you could put that much duct tape around somebody's face. You've got to know what the outcome's going to be. They intended.
Okay, so playing devil's advocate, could it be that if it was a younger person and you're trying to restrain, or have certainly started to restrain, a stronger person, you would do it more repeatedly to make sure that person,
that's true,
was more secure, restrained, fully restrained. Does that make sense? So devil's advocate there.
Well, that kind of leads nicely into our co-defendant. As Mum said, it's a young person. This is what I think is possibly the most shocking aspect of this case, is that our defendant today was at the time of the crime. So this was back in 2009, and it was Chattanooga's first homicide in 2009. So our defendant today, at the time of the crime, was just 13 years old. That's 13. And I can't wrap my head around it. As you guys will know, I did an episode on Ronald Lee Sanford, who was convicted of a double homicide when he was 13. So it happens, but I don't think it makes it any less shocking, really. So what we're going to do is we'll have a little bit of a chat now about Angel Bumpus. There is a Justice for Angel Bumpus webpage, which I've linked in the show notes if you want to have a look. It's just got some information about what she was like when she was younger. So they say, whoever set up this page, I assume it's friends and family, they say that when she was younger, she drew cartoons, she was quite artistic. She wanted to start a singing group, quite sort of average 13-year-old stuff, I would say. They said she was an academic type. She'd graduated high school and she went on to college where she was studying to become a nurse. And yeah, she sort of seems like quite a normal child, really.
I think when you meet her in the episode, and I appreciate you have to film things in a certain way, but you meet a young person who's got 2 children and is working. She's now living 300 miles away from the crime, but it's almost as if this has come out of the blue, that she has this accusation, and that she has now got lawyers involved. She's traveling 300 miles. She's making childcare arrangements. She's a responsible young woman. She's articulate. She's making these trips to see her lawyer to prepare. So it's not your typical, should we say, and that might be controversial in saying that she's a convict or has some history in that sense. So that's how she's presented to you. But then it's from there that you hear about her family history and whether her name, because of her name Bumpus, that is well known
in their area.
So also, is she being tarred with the same brush, if that makes sense?
So that's very true what Mum was saying. So when it comes to Angel's mum, that's her name's Tamika Bumpass. She does not appear in the episode. And that's because back in, I think it was the 1st of January 2002, her mum was incarcerated for forgery, financial identity fraud, escape, theft, aggravated assault on a police officer. She actually escaped from a prisoner transport vehicle and shot a deputy. He did not die, hence why it is aggravated assault and not murder. She is due to be released. Her earliest release date is the 22nd of September 2022. And her latest release date, if they don't let her out then, is 2042. So she's been gone for quite a while. She did not really raise Angel. So Angel was actually raised by her grandparents, who we will hear a lot more about later. So, and I think in the episode, they talk about how Angel's brothers are in prison. I think her mum is obviously in prison. I don't think her dad was really around. So lots of people were sort of commending this girl for overcoming some pretty big challenges. So according to this website, Justice for Angel Bumpus, in June 2018, she was a 23-year-old mother of two in her second year of nursing school, and she also worked a full-time job. Now, on this particular day in June is when a felony, there was a warrant for felony murder to be served to Angel. So 2 detectives have come to her door. Now, I mean, can you imagine? She's now 23. This crime happened about 10 years prior. Obviously, she claims to not know anything about these crimes. And then all of a sudden, her world has just completely collapsed around her. I mean, it doesn't even,
and I think
you can't even imagine.
From the episode, you can see the emotion when the emotional sort of turmoil, probably the most emotion shown was when the lawyer said to her, "You're going to have to make arrangements for your children in the event that
that's
you
when
are
she
found
breaks
guilty."
down.
And that's the time when she breaks down. So you've got a young woman, and she's a single mum. I didn't get any information to suggest that she was in a relationship, and there's no information about the father of the children. So she was working hard. It's such a tragedy, but it doesn't distract from what happened to Mr. Bonner. I think given her age and how long ago, bearing in mind she's 23, and this happened 10 years ago, that is a shock factor in itself.
Oh, absolutely. Now, you might be wondering how it was that 2 detectives suddenly came to this girl one day and, said she was wanted for felony murder. So 10 years after this case, so we're talking about around about 2019-ish, a new detective was assigned to what was now classed as a cold case. And what that detective decided to do was to retest the fingerprints that were taken from the duct tape, which was used to restrain Mr. Bonner. So there were a number of fingerprints, actually, but 2 in particular.
Wasn't there 9 unaccounted for?
9 unaccounted for, but 2 matched Angel Bumpus. That is how this has come back to Angel. 2 fingerprints on the adhesive side of the duct tape.
Only on the duct tape. Nowhere else, but 9 other prints unaccounted for.
So that means that they didn't match Angel. They didn't match her co-defendant, who we will come to. That's Mallory Vaughan. We'll come to him in a minute. It didn't match Linda Bonner, and it didn't match the victim, Franklin Bonner. So that begs the question, where did these fingerprints come from, and how are her fingerprints only, if this whole house was ransacked, how is it that her fingerprints aren't on furniture, aren't on fixtures or anything else in the house?
And given what we've previously said in the repeated nature of the tape being bound, the excessiveness of it, how are there only 2 prints when there was a potential explanation, a valid reason? Maybe that's strong, but there was a justification as to how that print may have come to be on the duct tape. So the frustration is that there doesn't seem to be any more information about these 9 prints, where they were. You just don't get the detail, which is frustrating. But maybe that's
what we'll do. We'll talk a bit more about. So this documentary really looks at the defense case and the sort of issues that they have. So one of the issues, as we've said, are these 2 fingerprints. They're not on the outside of the duct tape, they're on the adhesive side. So that's one of the issues. Another issue is there was a conversation between Angel's brothers in prison. I've had to call them Brother 1 and Brother 2 because I don't know their actual names. But basically, Brother 1 is phoning Brother 2, so they're obviously in 2 different prisons, and he asks his brother, have you heard what happened to Angel? Brother 2 says, what happened? Brother 1 said, it's some case that happened 9 years ago, a murder and an aggravated robbery, and Angel's hooked up for it. Brother 2 sort of says, oh, uh-oh. And Brother 1 says, 9 years ago, she was 13. Come on now. And they say, think about it. Think hard. Which, I mean, that also, what does that mean? Does it mean that the family knows a lot more than they're willing to say? So what we'll do, I've got a really quick trailer for you for a great podcast. And after that, we will start talking about the case, the trial, the verdict, and we'll have a bit more of a chat. Okay. As promised, I'm going to play a trailer for you for a really, really great podcast. It's called Riddle Me That. Jules is the host, is a great friend of mine. She's so supportive of her fellow podcasters. So please listen, leave her a lovely review, tell her that I sent you, and I really hope you enjoy it.
Hey listeners, are you a fan of true crime? If you are listening to this podcast, then you most certainly are. During these strange times, are you looking for a new true crime podcast? Then you have found your new true crime obsession. My podcast, Riddle Me That True Crime, covers both older cases as well as current ones. I cover both well-known and more obscure cases, such as the strange death of Blair Adams, the cyanide coffee murder of Myrna Salihin, and the disappearance of Sri Lanka's richest man, Upali Wijewardene. Riddle Me That True Crime is available on Apple, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you. Now back to the show.
So now we're going to talk about the trial of Angel Bumpus and her co-defendant Mallory Vaughan. So in the documentary, the Sky Crime documentary that we've been referring to, the defense team said that they were not going to put on what's known as an affirmative defense, i.e. self-defense. This isn't a case of he attacked me and I defended myself. The defense team said, our argument is that Angel was never there. But obviously we are talking about 10 years ago, which does cause some difficulties, because how do you say where you were?
Well, it said she was at school.
Yep.
And it says that her school bus dropped her off no later than 2:45. So that gave her an hour and 15 minutes to make a 2-mile journey. So she, with the 44 minutes that they said it took approximately, so let's even say she had half an hour
to get from her house where she was living to the Bonner's house. Her attorneys calculated that it would have taken roughly 44 minutes.
It said there was no sidewalks.
Yeah.
So were there any witnesses? Could there have been, I know we're 10 years later, so it's a bit different, but, her walking along the road at that time? I know it's all hindsight's a great thing, but it just felt quite vague. When you were watching it, you wanted to find out more detail of her day. And
yeah, that's true.
We didn't hear Angel's voice.
No.
At the trial. I think it's just frustrating because it just left you with more questions than it did answers, really.
I think part of the problem was that, and I see this in my job, when you have got a crime of any sort where there is a historic element, so a crime was committed even a year prior, 2 years prior, but in this case it's 10 years, it does make the defense job very, very difficult, because you are trying to piece together what Angel's day would have looked like, or what your client's day would have looked like, but you're asking them to remember from 10 years ago. So they can't speak specifically. They can say it was a school day, which they agree it was a school day. Her bus would have dropped her off at 2:45. And then they've said that would have left her an hour and 15 minutes for her to make the journey to the residence and commit the crime.
Equally, you want to ask the question, had she ever heard of Mallory Vaughan? Was she hanging around with people
who she shouldn't have been?
No, but who knew his name? Was he known? We all know as teenagers who we've been hanging about with at roughly a given time, who you were hanging around with at school. Was it somebody that was even on, sort of the periphery of friendships?
Is there any connection?
There any link?
Yeah.
But you never heard her say, I've never heard of him. I don't even, I've never even met this person. Where has this name come from? There was no defence in those terms, but you wanted to understand if that wasn't the case, she did have some connection. What was that connection? However remote.
And so it's also worth noting, there's no established, so as Mum said, there's no established connection between Angel Bumpus and Mallory Vaughan. When we get sort of into the trial in a minute, we'll explain how Mallory Vaughan's name came up in this case. But there is an established connection between the victim, Franklin Bonner, and Angel Bumpus. So obviously Franklin Bonner, when he died, I believe he was 68. Angel Bumpus was only 13. The connection is Shirley Bumpus, and that is Angel's grandmother. Her grandmother,
she was the last one to see him
speak to him. Yeah, this is how her name came up. She was actually originally a suspect in this investigation, the original investigation when Franklin Bonner first died. So what they've said, the state during the trial would say that Shirley was the last person to talk to the victim, and the purpose of that was to buy marijuana. And so at the time, Shirley confirmed that this was the case, but now denies any contact with the victim. But this is how the connection occurs. Also, Angel's grandfather, he is also a witness. He's actually a witness for the defense. He says that he used to do sort of odd jobs for the Bonner family, so painting, plumbing, etc., house repairs, once or twice a week. So he was fairly familiar with the couple. So, as we say, the defense are, I would say, they have got some problems. So as we've said before, these fingerprints of Angel's on the duct tape, on the adhesive side of the duct tape, the sticky side,
but nowhere else.
But nowhere else. That is a problem, but on the flip side as well, that could be a good thing, because how is it that you can say her fingerprints were on duct tape and absolutely nothing else? If you get a chance and you watch this documentary, look at the crime scene photos. They blur out the victim's face, still quite graphic, but you see the state of the house. I mean, it's completely ransacked.
Yeah.
How is
as
it?
I've said, it's the it's the amount of tape. He is taped. We're not talking about somebody who's bound once or twice. He's bound up his arms, all the way from his sort of fingertips right up to his, top of his arm.
Awful.
That is not. There is no way that a single person could have that tape and bound him to that extent, and given the state of the home and the ransacked nature of it, that there was no other fingerprints of Angel's. But then there's 9 others that aren't accounted for. It almost sounds like it's a gang.
Yeah.
Maybe where Vaughan was one of.
You don't know.
One of
Yeah.
the gang. You don't know. You're only speculating. But it's almost 9 other fingerprints. How does that happen? That aren't accounted for.
As we've said, the defense has got kind of some hurdles. We can't say who these other fingerprints belong to, but to me, with no experience in investigating at all, I would think that identifying those 9 fingerprints, I mean, it's just a loose end that
quite a significant one.
Yeah, that's not being investigated to the fullest extent. They found someone, those fingerprints matched. Is it that they've kind of gone, well, that's enough? We've got someone for this crime. That end of story. So in the trial, prior to the trial, the defense team in the documentary, they really press Angel regarding her family and whether her family could have had any involvement, and actually whether she knows something. Not because they think that Angel was the perpetrator, but I think they think that Angel knows more than she's letting on, but that she's protecting someone, her family. And I think in particular her grandparents, which Angel time and time again says, I didn't have that relationship with my grandmother. I wouldn't.
And when she was speaking, you never felt any warmth.
The grandmother or Angel?
Angel.
Yeah.
In her voice about...
And her grandmother as well, actually.
Loyalty in that sense.
Yeah.
There didn't feel like that warmth in her voice, or when she spoke of them, looking at her body language there. It really was sort of, as she was saying, we didn't have that type of relationship. There wasn't really that emotion.
No. It's... So when they go into the courtroom, they have rehearsed, the defense team, because they are worried about... I think they perceive Angel as being evasive, possibly, because she's not willing to talk, because they practice those questions with her, which they're allowed to do in the US. So here in the UK, we are not allowed to rehearse any questions and answers that a client might be posed in the courtroom. We're not allowed to do that. However, in the US, and you see it in the documentary, you are allowed to, for want of a better word, practice. So, for example, mum might act as, she's my defense attorney, but she might act as a prosecutor for practice purposes for me to rehearse what I should or should not say.
But I think the defense attorney, Andrea, tried to get her on a level where you need to be honest with me.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, as a defense attorney, no experience, you need to know the honest truth, because that's the only way that you can possibly defend it. But I just felt that Angel's voice, I still, at the end of the documentary, feel that Angel's voice should have been heard.
Yeah, so the trial started, and we're going to come on to this because this is, I think, one of the biggest criticisms of Angel's defense team. So the trial, as you know, we've got 2 defense teams. So we've got Angel's and we've got the defense team of her co-defendant, Mallory Vaughan. Both parties I think I'm right in saying both parties claim to not know the other.
Yeah, there's
there's
no claim
interaction.
nothing.
Nothing.
You don't see them.
They don't even talk to each other.
See them looking,
no.
Over each other, and
there's no familiarity at all.
It just leaves you with a odd feeling, because you don't feel like before the trial you sort of really eked out all the information.
And that's not what you
around
want.
Their social networks and what was going on, at the time. Where was Mallory Vaughan living?
Who is Mallory Vaughan?
I don't know. But where was he living? Where was he hanging out?
Who were his friends? Who was associates? How does he fit? I have to say, and I know that we're looking at this through a documentary, and there's only sort of so much material that they can show. So,
and at the end of the day, it's for entertainment.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But it would have been interesting as a viewer to know more about him as a person and how he fits into the focus of the documentary was Angel. But it would have been interesting, as you say, to know how he fit into this whole puzzle.
Yeah, and I think that's why we probably watch these things, because they are a puzzle. They're a bit of a jigsaw, and I think they can see from the viewer's point of view, you're trying to unpick it, and maybe we're looking at it in more detail than the average Joe, but at the end of the day, you're trying to work it out, and it's sometimes when you do get that result, that you're really shocked, you're horrified, you're elated, whatever the emotion, the fact is that you feel that justice has been carried out, correctly and thoroughly, I think. And it's just, I think when you watch these documentaries, you can't always, you want to go and read the trial notes, really, don't you? And scrutinise things in more detail, but it just leaves you sometimes a bit, I don't understand. So
yeah, you only get part of the story, don't you? Because we're not the jury who's sitting there day after day after day hearing everything. And the thing is, so when you look at as a juror, I've never been a juror.
No, I haven't. I don't know why they don't ask me. It's rude. No,
I've never been, and I don't know. I didn't realise that defence solicitors could be jurors. But somebody I know was on a colleague of mine was on a jury. I didn't think that was possible.
I think social workers definitely can. They definitely don't want me.
And I think with juries, so when Angel and her solicitors, or defence attorney, should I say, because this is America, when they're in the courtroom, you have got the Andrea Haydock, who is one of the defence attorneys. She tells Angel, and I thought this was really an interesting point, she tells Angel quietly that the jury will notice every reaction and every facial expression, so she needs to look almost pitiful and not angry or frustrated. And I thought, as a young person, or any person whose life has been turned upside down, how would you hide frustration and anger at the situation that you are in? I know they're saying she has to, and I know why they're saying it, but similarly, how do you show pitiful? I don't even know what my face would look like if I was trying to be pitiful.
Yeah, I don't know. And also, I know it has to be a show. You know that body language
plays a huge part.
Is a huge part. And you certainly don't want somebody shouting, wailing, or causing disruption. But I think in terms of how you present yourself, I suppose it's like when you go for an interview, how you present yourself is very important, but it doesn't feel comfortable.
No,
to say that you look,
to look a certain way,
but then you hear victims' families, when they are in the court, that the
victim impact statements,
but the person didn't look remorseful.
Sorry,
So maybe that is important, but I don't know how remorseful I would want to to look if I was innocent.
Yeah. It's hard to look
Because
remorseful for something you haven't done.
And to keep that emotion in must be so hard.
But like you said, I think that everybody would interpret your body language a little bit differently. So if I was confident, that might be misconstrued as me being arrogant. But I'm saying I didn't do it. Or if I looked sad, that might be interpreted as guilt.
It's quite fascinating.
It is.
And I'm sure these in terms of attorneys and their training, I'm sure this is a huge part of it, but it doesn't make this, the situation for Angel, as her voice wasn't heard, it must have been even more difficult.
So as we've already said, the prosecutor tells the jury that the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation found 2 fingerprints on the duct tape, and these matched Angel Bumpus. The defense attorney, Garth Best, tells the court that there were 9 other fingerprints at the scene which didn't match Mallory Vaughan, Angel Bumpus, the victim, or his wife, and that these people are unknown. The defense reminds the jury that the prosecution has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. I feel like lots of people don't really understand what that means. In everyday life, I mean. When you say beyond a reasonable doubt, what would your interpretation of that be? The idea is, if you have any doubt in your mind, you should find that person not guilty. You look at our conviction rates in this country, in the US.
Yeah.
You'd have much lower conviction rates if people were really sticking to beyond a reasonable doubt.
Okay.
That's a high threshold.
That is. So in my job, when we assess mental capacity on the balance of probabilities, it's sort of like 51%. If you feel that person has capacity. Balance of probabilities.
That's the same in civil law. It's that, or family law. It's balance of probabilities. But in criminal law, because you are, there's I don't know, because I suppose because there's so much on the line, it's that high threshold. But I do feel like some people don't really understand, because if they did, some of these cases they'd never lead to conviction. A lot of cases would never lead to conviction.
But you would like to think that these juries are well coached or well versed in the meaning of that. Understanding of their role, because you are a lay person at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's the point, isn't it? Yeah. You're meant to be judged by your peers. And when I hate to mention coronavirus, but when the coronavirus came in, there were issues, obviously, with jury trials, because the number of people involved in a jury trial, you've got not only the jury, you've got members of the court, you've got defense solicitors, you've got their clients, you've got other witnesses, etc. And there was talk of getting rid of juries in favour of a judge. And people they were not happy about that at all, because they said you're supposed to be, judged by your peers.
Are they going to cut the number of, wasn't it 7 or something?
They've tried to reduce the size of juries. They've tried doing it where it's all over like webcam or whatever. But anyway, so the prosecution called their first witness, and this was Linda Bonner, the victim's wife. She confirmed that she had been working on that Friday and that her husband was killed. She found his body when she returned home about 5:20. She said, "As I walked in, my baby was on the floor. He was taped round like this," and she's gesturing, putting tape around your head. And then she said he was taped up and down, and she's gesturing tape. So we're talking about multiple layers of duct tape, which is, and she was crying, as you can obviously imagine. And that's got to be so traumatic to come home to. I can't imagine anything much worse than that, really.
No, but I know I keep repeating myself, but it's the extent of it.
It's just overkill, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, pardon the phrase, but yeah, it is. And what did they actually take? What did they actually take? I know I was just
they
trying to
never
recall
actually say
whether actually anything was taken. There was
no. I think they
a home
I think they
invasion.
said that it was something to do with money and the drugs because Franklin Bonner was known to sell marijuana. I think there was talk of it potentially having something to do with money and drugs, but I don't think anything was actually taken.
Okay.
So the prosecution's key witness in this case was the forensic scientist who identified Angel's fingerprints on the duct tape. So what they've done with Mr. Bonner's body, they have removed all the strips of duct tape from him and they've analysed it for fingerprints. And this is the only evidence that connects Angel.
Was there any other fingerprints in terms of, we have the 9, but we never determined where they were? Were there any other fingerprints on that duct tape?
I don't know if it was on the duct tape. All I know that there were 9 other fingerprints that were extracted. I think they were. I want to say they were on the duct tape, but I don't know if I've made that up. Or were they from this? Or were they from the scene?
Know, but
they were from the scene, weren't they? They're from the house.
Oh yeah, but where? You know, again, surely that is quite
important.
Fundamentally, the crux of it. Where were these 9? You know, because what if there were another print on the tape?
The forensic scientist in this case, her name is Elizabeth Reed. She was employed by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. In court, she identified a photograph showing a strip of this duct tape. And from this piece, she was able to develop an identifiable latent print, which was matched to Angel Bumpus. Reed confirmed these fingerprints were found on the adhesive side of the tape. And you actually hear the jury in the documentary react to this audibly. And I think, had they been on the outside, I'm trying to think, if I'm holding duct tape, holding it, obviously, if the fingerprints are on the outside, that's kind of neither here nor there. I think the issue the defense team had
the inside.
was on the sticky side of the tape. And the defense attorneys feared that the jury thought that Angel must have been there for her fingerprints to get on the sticky side of the tape.
Yeah, and they obviously didn't feel that the reasoning behind that, or the possible reasoning why her fingerprint could have been there, was not just. It wasn't enough. It didn't lend enough weight to the fact that, there's this horrid scene and her fingerprint is the only one.
And I don't think she ever admitted to being at that house before. I don't think she knew the Bonners, so it's not as if she's ever sort of been to their house before.
I don't think she.
So, but defense attorney Andrea Hayduck asked in cross-examination, she asked Elizabeth Reed whether you can tell in time when a fingerprint was made on a piece of evidence. The point she was obviously trying to make was that Angel's fingerprints could have been on that duct tape from 2 years ago. Forensic scientists cannot say how long that fingerprint's been there. And Elizabeth Reed confirmed that. She said, I know. I don't know how long that's been there. And you can't tell.
I don't. And I know where, I'm getting technical now, but where on the strip was it? Because if you're at the
I know. I'm thinking this as well.
The strip, your fingerprint is going to be on the inside.
Yeah.
So, okay, has that roll of tape been hanging around, a workshop of her grandfather's, and okay, it's on the edge, and you could see that. But even if you unravelled it,
Yeah.
Or maybe even 2. Are they both at the end
That's what,
of the, the sort of start of where you're pulling? Because you could justify that and say maybe 2 years ago. But if we're saying it's midway along the strip, do you get what I mean?
Yeah. And also, are the 2 fingerprints on one strip? Because if you've torn one strip off, let's say you use the duct tape last, my fingerprint or my thumbprint, whatever, would be on that strip. But then if there's a second, if my fingerprint is then further along the strip, that would indicate that 2 strips have been torn off, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and when you're thinking
that wouldn't make sense.
forensics, is it that they can say, do they have, and this might be ridiculous, where each strip, when they, take the tape off the poor man, do they literally detail where each strip has come from on his body?
I don't. They must do.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? To that level, to say, okay, this fingerprint was found on this strip, whereabouts on the strip it was found. Or, I know it sounds ridiculous, it looked like, we're making it sound like they cut up neat little strips. It looked like potentially you could start the roll, start wrapping, and they just continuously wrapped and wrapped and wrapped and wrapped. So there was no clear cut off. It could have been just one long continuous piece. But we're getting a bit technical.
I've never talked about duct tape more in my life, or analysed duct tape more in my life.
But I would want to know whereabouts that fingerprint was in relation to the roll of tape.
But also, what I don't understand as well, leading on from that, is if her fingerprints are on the duct tape, we are accepting that she was not wearing gloves if she was there. Angel cannot have been wearing gloves and have left a fingerprint. But there's no way that you're going to use duct tape to duct tape the poor man, then put gloves on so that you don't get fingerprints over the rest of the house.
And then there was no other evidence, like no
fingerprints, no
shoe
nothing.
Prints, no DNA,
nothing. And it does beg the question. Also, going back to the duct tape again, if you've got duct tape, that's not the sort of stuff that you can tear easily, is it? I always think you need scissors because it's obviously quite strong stuff. Yeah. So I would expect more fingerprints because you've got to hold it whilst you're, I don't know. There's so many questions, and obviously this documentary doesn't go into all that detail, but that would have been interesting to know a bit more about. We've got, as we've said countless times, we've got 9 the scientists confirmed there were 9 unidentified fingerprints that were found at the crime scene. She doesn't specify where. Now you could say, well, maybe the Bonners had maintenance men at one point and you might be able to eliminate some of those fingerprints, but it doesn't seem as though any inquiries were sort of made. It was just, we've got 9 unidentified fingerprints, that's that.
Let's be honest, we're just frustrated Miss Nichols.
What the defence were trying to do, and I think it's true, there were a lot of loose ends that the prosecution simply didn't investigate fully. For example, the 9 unidentified fingerprints. How is it that you've got, that's potentially 2-3 more people?
But we're talking 10 years on.
Yeah.
So those people have never, and it was 9 separate fingerprints.
Yeah.
So 9 individuals. Or is it 9?
I don't know.
9 fingers.
That would have narrowed down the pool of potential suspects.
Well, whether it's
if you know it's a 9-fingered person.
No, I mean, has it? I don't know. But it just, those people have never committed another crime. There is no records for that. Those people 10 years on.
They've never flagged. So they would have put it through.
Never flagged up.
Is it CODIS, the fingerprint in the US? I think it's CODIS. I think that's the fingerprint because, like over here, so as part of my job, I go to prisons and I have my fingerprints scanned when I go into prisons, and they all go to like a central database. It's the same, I think, with police officers and such. Mm-hmm. They all have their fingerprints on file. As you say, how is it? Because Angel got dragged into all of this, because of I think it was a speeding ticket. She got pulled over for failing to attend court on a speeding ticket, and they took her fingerprints when they arrested her, and that's how she flagged. So as you say, how these people have never been flagged on any system. I mean, it sounds as though it hasn't been investigated to the fullest extent, and that's I don't think there's really any excuse for that. I know money and time, but when you're talking about somebody's life, their liberty, I think everything should be done. But
it does seem very odd, but I suppose it happens. I mean, they look at advances when they have fingerprints from, years ago.
Yeah, cold cases.
And then somebody, flags up, and this is a case in point, isn't it?
Yeah.
But to have nothing else, DNA, any kind of
anything
really, footprints, anything. There was nothing found.
Well, Carl Fields was the original investigator in the case. He claimed that Angel's grandmother called Franklin Bonner hours before he died. He confirmed for the court that he had examined the caller ID and that the sort of last number on the list was Shirley Bumpus, Angel's grandmother. Fields also told the court that Shirley had originally accepted that she did call Bonner for the purpose of purchasing marijuana. So the prosecution then called Shirley Bumpus, and Shirley Bumpus was not a particularly warm woman in any sense. She was quite hard. She wasn't very emotional at all, considering her granddaughter, who she's raised for most of her life.
I didn't see them look at each other.
Or even embrace or talk or anything.
No, or when they went to the house and spoke to the grandfather.
I thought there might be some emotion or something.
No, but I think it's easy to sit here and speculate.
Yeah.
And we know that they were quite a well-known family.
Yeah.
And where we have not had experience in this sense, that they have had contact with the law. I don't know whether Shirley Bumpus had actually served any time, but certainly come into contact with the law before. That maybe you have got more of a hardened exterior, should we say?
Possibly. And so on the stand, I think I got the impression the defence team, Angel's defence team, were worried about Shirley Bumpus giving evidence because she was now changing her story, supposedly. So she initially accepted, I made that phone call, or it's according to Carl Fields, the investigator, Shirley originally accepted that she made the call to Franklin Bonner. She was the last person to speak to him. However, on the stand and when she was talking to the defence team in private, she said she didn't make that call. She couldn't recall saying she went to the Bonner residence. She couldn't recall purchasing marijuana at 2:15 p.m. that day. She denied being the last person to see the victim or speak to him. And that raised some alarm bells. The defence team said that by denying her original statements, it looked as if Shirley had something to hide and that she was just trying to protect her granddaughter.
Which that doesn't take a genius.
No.
Let's be honest.
No. So towards the end of the first day of the trial, Angel expresses frustration to the camera. She's frustrated at her legal counsel. She said, I don't want them to be nice. I want them to fight as if it was their lives on the line. So tensions are, that was the end of the second day. Tensions are really high. It is your life, isn't it? And she knew the sentence that she was facing.
And would any of us be any different?
No, absolutely not. So trial day 3, we have got the prosecution's final witness. And this is how Mallory Vaughan got wrapped up in this whole case. As I said on a previous episode, all of these cases, I swear, have a jailhouse informant.
I know. They always come out.
They always come out the woodwork. It's funny that.
I know it sounds sticks, but they never say anything like, amazing. Like,
It's not, it's, oh, he told me that he committed the crime. I'm not joking. I'm not a criminal. I'd just like to make that clear. But if I was, I feel like rule of thumb is don't go telling lots of people that you did it.
I know. And it's like, he told me he did it. And you think, wow, that is like...
How did that come up in conversation?
That is ground-shaking stuff, isn't it? And you think, okay, right. And then all you know is that he's actually tried to bargain... some sort of deal for himself. Yeah. So I think, come on. Well, I don't understand.
Our jailhouse informant today is Nicholas Cheetham. I know.
You make it sound like it's a game show.
It does. Come today, on down.
Yeah. Oh, that's ironic.
Cheetham. Yeah. Yeah. A bit unfortunate. So he testified quite simply that Mallory Vaughan told him while they were in jail that he duct taped the victim up. Yeah. But he doesn't mention a female accomplice, which is interesting. So it is sort of knowledge. It is known that he testified, Mr. Cheetham, in the hope of having his sentence reduced. That was the purpose of it. And I think that's such an awful... I get the incentive. I get it. But you're just sort of setting yourself up for a failure because anybody's going to lie, aren't they? And say, he might have never had a conversation with Mallory Vaughan.
And I think we have got to, when we're thinking about, what we're actually doing here and what we're discussing, there are lots of documentaries where you see a case in its entirety with, one defendant, two defendants, but you get insight into, the whole situation and the crime. Whereas in Mallory Vaughan's case, we don't. We have this very limited...
Oh, it would have been so interesting.
Information. So we're making judgments that, or our opinions, maybe more our frustrations, based on one side of things.
Oh, yeah. But as far as I can tell, there is no physical evidence that ties Mallory Vaughan to this case.
No, I don't.
As far as what we see from the documentary,
then that's reflected in in the outcome, isn't it?
So the defense attorney tells the camera. This is Andrea Haydock. She tells the camera that if Mallory Vaughan is found not guilty, Angels will have to be found not guilty as well because there's no way she could have committed the crime on her own. And I can see why she would say that because you cannot tell me that a 13-year-old girl would be able to sort of fight overpower a fully grown adult man. And we're not talking elderly, 68. We're not talking
I didn't...
83
Did we see a photo
90.
of him... like a family photo or anything, I can't recall, but, I don't know what his height, frame,
health,
weight was, his health, did he have, because you can have, especially in my work, you can have somebody who's in their 60s who is frail,
True.
Unwell, quite vulnerable. Age doesn't always come into it. So I don't know
enough about him.
Mr. Bonner, what his... from a purely from a 13-year-old girl, yes, I appreciate that, but I'm just saying maybe not to stereotype.
There might be something.
A healthy, tall, strong man. He may not necessarily have been. Was he fully mobile?
So that's the defense attorney's point of view, is that if Mallory Vaughan is found not guilty, then Angel will be found not guilty as well, because they don't believe that she could commit this crime on her own. So before the defense sort of open their case, the judge asks whether Angel will be testifying. And the defense ask for a few moments just to confirm the position with their client one last time. When they are in private consultation, Angel says, and she said it before in the documentary as well, she says that she feels that the jury are waiting to hear from her. But her defense team advise against her testifying because they say she can't explain everything the jury wants to hear, such as how her fingerprints got on the sticky side of the tape. What did you make of that decision?
I think she should have spoken. I think that you would have seen and heard the sort of her voice, her view, what was going on for her 10 years ago.
What she's like as a person now as well. The life she's made for herself.
And she can articulate that. But just to give some context, it's all you've got is this piece of evidence which looks quite damning. And to hear her voice, even how she speaks, what was going on for her? What was she doing as an average 13-year-old?
Yeah.
Her surname goes before her. Her family are well known.
And not in a good way, unfortunately.
Police. Yeah. So without that voice, and hindsight's a great thing, and it'd be great to sort of almost get the thoughts of her defence attorneys now, and what their learning was from it.
Yeah.
They may stand by what their decision there was, and that was the right thing. But I just think that would have given them more of a human element.
Before we move on, I'd just like to make it clear that if you can hear any snoring, it is not my special guest. It's our sausage dog, Dora, who is laying on my mum's lap. She's got attachment issues and is appearing also in the episode. I'll put a picture on Twitter if you want to see what she looks like. She is super cute, but she's really loud, so apologies.
I'm trying to stop her snoring, but she's
not even
very
asleep.
Relaxed. Yeah, she hasn't even got her eyes closed and she's snoring, so sorry.
This is why I don't have a co-host. I just want to
this rules out ever having a co-host. I won't be coming back. You can all be glad of that. But Dora is actually the special guest.
Oh, dear.
She's very special.
She is. So before the defence open their case, the judge asks them whether Angel will be testifying. Now, this is a huge decision. And Angel, throughout the documentary, she mentions it a few times, I want to speak. But her defence team say that they don't think she should because she cannot explain everything the jury are going to want to hear. The jury will have questions such as how her fingerprints got on the sticky side of the tape, and Angel's defence team say, well, you simply can't answer that. So they say, we don't think you should testify. Angel, having heard this, eventually, and I think the word is probably reluctantly, agrees with her defence team.
I know I've watched other when you watch other documentaries and things, and there are times where people don't speak. The defendant doesn't speak, and I would be lying if I said I completely understand all the reasoning. Yeah. I think that given that she was a 13-year-old girl, what was she doing on an average day? Who was she hanging out with? Yeah. How was she getting on at school? What was her life like? Because her name goes before her. Her family are well known by the police at the time, and there's a risk of being labelled.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying she was maybe not a complete angel at that time, but it just gives a point of reference for this person.
Yeah, it makes her more human.
Yeah, and she is an articulate young woman.
Oh, absolutely.
She was working. She has 2 children. I just think it gives you a huge human element that was missing.
Yeah.
And almost the evidence was damning.
In a case such as, let me turn this on its head, we don't see whether Mallory Vaughan testifies or not.
No.
I don't think that his team would have told him to testify unless there was some alibi or something. Because the evidence against him was already so weak, I don't think he really had much. He needed to say anything, really. But nevertheless, in Angel's case, there was a damning piece of evidence, and I think the jury, looking at her, they see a 20-something-year-old woman. You need to remind them that at that time she was going to school. She loved singing, and she loved, you kind of got to make her seem like
she was quite
child.
shy, and
Yes,
there was no description about her
as a
personality.
person.
So you really, that leaves you feeling vague. You've not, the human interaction with someone is really important in that situation. I just think, given this situation, to hear her voice and the person she is now,
and could have made a difference.
It would have given them. Okay, would it change the outcome? We don't know, but it would have given a real sense of who she is. And what her life was like 10 years ago. Was she hanging out on street corners, with gangs, or was she
setting up girl groups with her friends? Or
I'm
was
not
she,
saying they're all going to Girl Guides.
No,
but equally, I just think some context
would have been good. I think, as you say, especially with her family and her family history, we know she's got, and the jury will know, she's got 2 brothers in prison. Her grandmother was trying to buy marijuana, which may or may not be frowned upon. I don't know. Her mum is in prison.
But she didn't have any other convictions. She
No.
hadn't had any...
Apart from this speeding ticket thing.
Yeah.
That's it.
But she hadn't been involved with the police...
It's not as far as I'm aware.
Prior to this, or
no,
in that time. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm sure if you had a defence attorney here, they may argue quite differently. But just a viewpoint.
On the website, the Justice for Angel website, which I'm going to come back to in a bit, but it said that Angel was, quite quiet, and they sort of described her, and it did give you a little bit of insight into this girl, which I think could have been helpful for a jury to hear. But nevertheless, the decision is made for Angel to not testify. And Andrea Haydock tells Angel, "We're not losing." And Angel says, "Okay." And that's the decision. Andrea Haydock then says, "I need a few minutes to breathe. You take a few minutes to breathe, and then we'll go back in court." And that's what they do. So they then call, the defence now, it's their case, so they now call Baylis Smith, and that's their key witness, and this is Angel's grandfather. Baylis was an important witness because he could possibly explain how Angel's fingerprints ended up on the duct tape in the Bonner's house. So Baylis tells the court that Angel used to do arts and crafts in his workshop. And he said, "I used to keep the duct tape in the garage." He said at times when she was in there playing, I would roll the duct tape inside out and throw it to her. She'd catch it and couldn't put it down because it was sticky, so it would keep her busy for a while. Baylis also confirmed that he did handiwork for Mr. Bonner, and it was therefore possible, we can't say for sure, but he said it was possible that he could have brought the duct tape to the residence and left it there, which could have explained it.
Yeah, it's not completely off the wall.
No.
That's what I think part of the shock was, that there was that
is reasonable.
Could have been quite a reasonable, quite reasonable justification for why her prints might have been on. That's why I think you want, the thing of where the prints were on the tape, and what we were discussing before. But
if he says, "I rolled the tape inside out and would throw it to her," then potentially her fingerprints could have been in the middle of a strip of tape. I don't.
It's believable.
It is.
Let's be honest.
So, yeah, I mean, Andrea Haydock, sort of, she is of her whole point in this case is to try and explain away those fingerprints, because that is the only real crucial piece of evidence. So in the closing statements, the defense said that the only evidence were these 2 fingerprints on a roll of duct tape, which is a mobile object that can be carried from, could have been brought from anywhere, could have gone anywhere. And actually in court, Andrea Haydock holds a roll of duct tape in the court.
Yeah. And she demonstrates.
She does.
But it's a link. That's what I mean. I think it's the fact that you can actually link it to the grandfather and Mr. Bonner. You know,
Yeah.
there is a link of why potentially it's there.
It's a reasonable explanation.
But without the other bits of the jigsaw puzzle around it, I think it's, well, yeah, it's shaky, isn't it?
Yeah, and in court, Andrea Haydock, she holds this roll of duct tape. She tears a strip off and tells the court that her fingerprints are now all over the duct tape. She then asks the jury if this duct tape with my fingerprints on it is then used in the commission of a crime, does that mean that I was ever at the crime scene or that I was ever involved? And that is a good question. We're not talking about fingerprints on a tabletop or on a chair in the Bonner home. It is a mobile object. You were going to say something then.
But I think you'd have to look back at the original investigation as well. You know, who were the witnesses? You know, were there any flaws in the original investigation? Because we didn't hear enough about that. So, you know, we could be putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with 5. But yeah, it's the original. It comes back to the original investigation as well, and sort of scrutinising that, I think.
When Andrea Haydock, as she sort of concludes her closing argument, she raises the issue of the 9 unidentified fingerprints. She raises the fact that Angel would have had to walk 2.5 miles to get to the Bonner residence. She raises the point that Angel denies ever knowing Mallory Vaughan. And she actually calls the prosecution's case ridiculous. Then the prosecuting attorney, Cameron Williams, delivers his closing argument. He asks the jury whether it's just a coincidence that Shirley Bumpass was the last person to call the Bonner residence. He believes, and he tells the jury this, he believes that Shirley Bumpass knew it would sound bad if she admitted she was the last person to speak to Mr. Bonner, which is why she then subsequently changed her evidence from the original investigation. Yeah. He tells the jury that Angel's fingerprints got on the tape because she was helping her friend Mallory Vaughan commit a robbery. And that's the case. That is the trial. As I say, it is only not even half the story, really.
Yeah.
But that is the case. And the jury then retires to consider their verdict. And by this point, Angel is crying. She says it's the worst week of her life. And I think it's because she knows there's nothing more that she can do. There's nothing. That's it. Once that case closes, you're in the hands of some strangers who are basically deciding whether you walk home and go home and see your children, or whether you spend the rest of your life behind bars. The jury deliberate it's about 4.5, 5 hours. They deliberate for, and then they come back and they say they have reached a verdict in both cases. Mallory Vaughan, you're probably not surprised, but Mallory Vaughan was found not guilty. Angel Bumpus, on the other hand, was found guilty of count 1, first-degree felony murder, and count 2, attempt to commit especially aggravated robbery. And Angel, at this point, I mean, it's quite upsetting, really, because at this point, she starts crying and she's trying to just leave the courtroom. She says, I don't want to stay here anymore. She tells her defense team that she just wants to go because she's never going to see her children again. So Angel would later be sentenced to 60 years in prison, meaning she will not be eligible for parole until the year 2070 for a crime she supposedly committed when she was just 13 years old. I mean, that's just shocking.
Well, yeah.
That's just shocking.
That's why I said to you, I was just so shocked. And I think I messaged you straight away and said, you have to watch.
It was such a roller coaster episode.
It was. And I suppose that's what they're aiming for.
Yeah. Oh yeah, when they're editing and whatever. Yeah.
So they want that shock and that impact for you to continue watching. But I think given what we've discussed, and just from, you've obviously got training, on the legal side of things, but just purely from a lay person's point of view, and with the limited information that the show gave you, that's devastating. That's a devastating verdict.
Because if she's, say, 25 now, and we're in 2020, and she's not eligible for parole for another 50 years. I mean, it just doesn't even bear thinking about. Her defense attorney, Andrea Haydock, or one of her defense attorneys, said to camera, quote, "I don't know how to walk out of here and go home to my kids when she's locked in a cell for the next 60 years. I don't understand how the system could put a child away for the rest of her life and let the adult walk away." Yeah.
I think speechless is the word. I think I had to pause the telly and sort of... What?
You do just have to take a moment, don't you?
Yeah. 60 years. 60 years.
Having never been troubled before, reference of what prison's going to be like.
Wow. Yeah.
Angel filed an appeal on the 20th of December 2019, and she originally had a hearing scheduled for the 7th of February. It was then pushed back to the 27th of March, but in an update, one of Angel's family members announced that her court date had been moved again, obviously due to the coronavirus. So at the moment, it's unclear where we are at with her case. I'm not entirely sure. We'll just have to wait and see. As I say, the court systems in this country are struggling to try and sort of deal with the backlog. And I just find that really shocking.
Yeah, I don't think there's any words really, because I don't think in your mind. And that's, that's around your age.
Yeah.
It would be good to hear from her now. It's almost... I know that we obviously have the campaign and she is appealing, but it would be good to hear her voice now.
Yeah.
What she,
knowing what she knows now. Yeah.
Reflecting back on the trial.
Would she have done things differently?
Yeah. And I can imagine certainly how she was captured on the show. She can articulate quite clearly her views, and she would have probably still maintained that she should have.
Oh, I think she would have gone. She'd go back in a heartbeat and testified.
But hindsight's a great thing.
It is.
I just think it's a really interesting case, and I think the fact that she's a young person, that length of time, the impact on her children, is devastating. It's devastating for poor Mr. Bonner. There's no winners out of this.
There never is in criminal cases, really. Someone's had a crime committed against them, whatever that may be, it's violating, whether that is a street mugging or a murder of a family member. And it's traumatic.
Yeah. The weight of it is Mr. Bonner's life ended.
Yeah.
That is beyond tragic.
Yeah.
Whether that happened 5 days ago, 10 years ago, the fact is
someone's lost their
life.
life.
And the gravity of that, it's incomprehensible. But I just think it's a really interesting case.
There's just a couple of points that I wanted to raise before we finish. So, as we mentioned earlier, there's the Justice for Angel website that everybody can access. I think it's run by Friends and Family. They have put some things on that I just think are worth sort of highlighting at this point. So they say that if at 13 any person commits a violent, horrific crime, such as the crime that was committed against Mr. Bonner, some psychological effect would have been seen, noticed by someone. Angel had a normal teenage life and normal adult life up until 2018, when she was falsely accused, and now it is in chaos since she's been found guilty of a crime that she has no knowledge of. And I kind of agree with that bit. in as far as you would expect to see increasing levels of sort of poor behaviour or something.
And that's why I think this case will divide opinion.
Yeah. The family on this website are very critical of Angel's defence lawyers. I wonder if they do things differently, the defence lawyers, looking back on it. I don't know, but I wonder if they would. So on this website, they say, and again, this is a quote, Angel's lawyers, Hayduck, Best, failed to present any type of mitigating circumstances, character witnesses to construct a picture as to who Angel was at that point in her life, to show that she was not capable of anything of that nature. Angel's lawyers were highly disillusioned in the picture they painted, leading Angel to believe she had no worries. It was all a mistake that would be sorted out, they told her. That sort never happened, and on October 3rd, 2019, Angel was found guilty due to her lawyers not taking her case seriously. The damage they inflicted is at the expense of her life.
Character witnesses, that's what that is.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's
what we said.
The word I was thinking. I was trying to think character is the word about her personality. Yes, that's correct.
So they go on to say, Angel's attorneys violated her constitutional rights when they failed to put any investigation effort into her defence. Any defence counsel has a duty to independently investigate the facts, circumstances, and law in every case they handle to be effective. The duty to investigate includes an obligation to investigate all witnesses who may have information concerning his or her client's guilt or innocence. Due to Angel's defence attorney deciding not to investigate or present a defence resulted in an inadequate performance that was unreasonable. Angel's lawyers' lack of investigation and misrepresentation deprived the defendant of a fair trial. Angel's lawyers' misrepresentation of the facts and laws clearly shows ineffective assistance. They go on to say that Angel was an 8th grade honour roll student at Brown Middle School. That morning, Angel rode the bus from her grandmother's house to school. It was a normal day for Angel. Nothing out of the ordinary happened for her. She rode the bus to arrive home at 2:45 p.m. She's a 23-year-old mother of 2, in her second year of nursing school, enrolled at JCTC, while also working a full-time job. And that, I do agree with them. I can't say, I'm not going to criticise their defence attorneys because I'm sure they did the best of their abilities. But I do think about the character witnesses, I do think that would have potentially made a huge difference. The jury never really got to know Angel.
No, and that I say that in a roundabout sort of way, but I just character is the word.
You need character witnesses or somebody who could testify, about what she was like. Yeah. Some other things that I think, if you don't have anything else to add.
No, I think the strength of the character witnesses are even more so given that her family name was fairly well known to police. Siblings in prison, and her grandmother's contact with police, her mother being in prison. Those things, being tarnished with the same brush. So you would have thought those witnesses coming forward about her character would have been worth their weight in gold, really.
It might have shown a child overcoming adversity in life to be a mother of 2,
absolutely,
studying nursing, trying to be a productive citizen in society.
But that's why I think if she'd had a chance to speak and hear her voice.
Because then, even if she did speak and maybe said something she shouldn't have, then you could say, well, that was my fault. Do you know what I mean? Because she wanted to speak and her defence attorneys told her not to, even though it's her decision, she will say, I was taking advice of my legal counsel.
I suppose for a defence attorney, you've got to think of the cross-examination. Your whole thing is the cross-examination.
Yeah. By
the prosecution and the fear that, it may actually be the complete undoing of their case. So I'm sure it's weighed up over an extensive period of time. But yeah.
The other thing that I really wanted to sort of highlight now, we talked about Carl Fields, the original investigator. I don't know when it happened, but there was a bit of a scandal, really, when Carl Fields was fired from the Chattanooga Police Department. Now, I don't know how true these are, but it was said that there were multiple allegations against him, including sexually harassing a woman whose rape case was being investigated, coaching witnesses to lie, and tampering with evidence. He faced criminal charges in 2016, but these were later dismissed as there wasn't sufficient proof. So,
I mean, it's a case in point at the moment of police and their treatment of people,
yeah,
and their profiling of people, and she's a Bumpass, you know.
Yeah.
Was it investigated with bias? That's a whole nother story, but it's still you'd still want to look at the original investigation and scrutinise that.
As we've said, the biggest thing for me, or one of the biggest things for me, are those other fingerprints.
Yeah.
I cannot understand how you can look at a case, know there is outstanding evidence that you have no explanation for, and you're still proceeding on the basis that this person did it.
There are cases where fingerprints have been found.
They might be nothing.
And they've never...
Oh, I know.
You know, they've never actually found the person.
Yeah.
And that's what's almost heartbreaking about it, really, because they may never be found.
No. At the end of the documentary, or during the documentary, Angel, I just want to make it clear that Angel does express that she does feel bad for the victim and his family. She does say, I feel bad for the victim, I feel bad for his family. She said, but I feel worse for myself because I stand accused of a crime I had no involvement with.
Yeah, how could you not sympathise with the family?
Exactly.
It was barbaric what happened. And if you were innocent, of course you would have sympathy with the victim's family.
Yeah, which she does. She says
she does. You know that.
I feel bad for them.
I think that's totally natural feeling, but I think, yeah.
But her desire to, or the self-preservation desire outweighs anything, because you're trying to keep yourself with your children out of prison.
Yeah.
I hope that you have enjoyed today's waffly episode.
Waffly, yes.
This was just something a bit different. If you've listened to the Student's Verdict before, you'll know that usually it's just me chatting away. And today I figured for our 10th episode, we would do something a bit different. So thank you so much for joining me and my mum, and a huge thank you to my mum and Dora for joining us today.
Thank you very much for listening. I won't be coming back. You'll be glad to know. Apologies for the waffle and losing words. But I will look forward to your sort of comments in terms of what questions it raises. And I hope it creates a bit of debate, really.
Tweet us or tweet me at Student Verdict if you've got any points you'd like to raise.
And we'll keep a lookout for on the Angel Bumpus webpage.
Yeah, and see how her appeal goes.
Yes,
you never know
what the updates are, because I'd be interested to see.
The Student's Verdict is a bi-weekly podcast, so follow us on social media to hear about our next episode. Student's Verdict can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, Spreaker, now iHeartRadio, and Google Play. And while you're there, why not check out Riddle Me That podcast? And I will see you on the next one. And remember to keep living the dream.